Here's a question for you. How many "he's so smart" stories does a grown man get to tell about his 5-month-old before it's socially acceptable to make fun of him for it? Because that's basically the entire court case we're about to sit through. One dinner, one joke, and a friendship that's been quietly cooling off ever since. I am Agony Yan, and let's get into it. So, our original poster is out to dinner with a group of guys he went to high school with. Nothing unusual here. Old friend group, probably a semi-regular thing. One of the guys at the table isn't just an old classmate though. He's one of OP's closest friends. And about 5 months ago, that friend became a dad for the first time. Now, if you've ever sat at a table with a brand new parent, you already know where this is going. The whole dinner, the friend can't stop talking about the baby. He's got the finger grab story, he's got the raise his hand when I do story, he's got the he makes a sound that's basically dada story. All completely normal 5-month-old stuff, by the way. OP even says as much. Nothing this baby is doing is unusual. It's just baby stuff. But here's the detail that seems to have quietly driven OP up the wall. After almost every single story, the dad tacks on the same line. He is so smart. Every time. Like a verbal period at the end of every sentence. And OP throws in this little extra dagger of an observation. Apparently that exact phrase, he is so smart, is something the dad's wife always says about people on her side of the family. And the friend never used to say this before he started dating her. So now, in OP's telling, we've got a guy who has fully absorbed his wife's catchphrase and is deploying it after every single baby anecdote to a table of guys who did not sign up for this. OP says everyone at the table seemed bored. OP was getting a little annoyed, and instead of just letting it ride or changing the subject the normal way, OP decides to lighten the mood with a joke. His exact words: "If I were you, I would buy him some books and send him to school already." The table laughs, mission accomplished. Joke lands, except the dad doesn't laugh long. OP clocks that his friend is visibly offended. And since that dinner, radio silence, more or less. They haven't hung out in person since. They've exchanged a few texts, but OP says that the vibe is different now, colder, more distant. So OP heads to Reddit with the big question: am I the asshole? Now, the single most upvoted comment on this whole thread comes from a user who basically translates the joke for OP. Their take: what you actually said underneath the humor was, "Shut up now, I am not interested in this." And look, that's harsh, but they don't stop there. They point out that having a baby is an all-consuming life change. New parents don't get out much in those early months. They don't get a ton of adult conversation that isn't about the baby or work or both. So of course, the guy was going to talk about his kid. It's probably 90% of his personality right now, whether he likes it or not. Then, this commenter drops the verdict that basically defines the whole thread's mood. No assholes here, but also oof. As in, nobody's really the villain, but that joke still stunk, and it stunk for a reason. A reply underneath adds an angle a lot of people seem to agree with. Think about what it actually took for this dad to be at the dinner in the first place. Getting a night away from a 5-month-old isn't just grab your keys and go. It's planning, it's negotiating with your partner, it's missing bath time and bedtime to be there. So when he does finally show up, he's excited, and someone at the table basically tells him to pipe down. That's going to land differently than a normal, "okay, we get it," would. On the other side of the argument, you've got a comment with over 400 points calling OP flat out immature. Their point: carving out that kind of time away from a newborn takes real effort, and OP repaid that effort by making the guy the punchline. Their verdict: you're the asshole. But that comment gets a pretty strong pushback almost immediately. From someone else, racking up a lot more points, who basically says, how is a light-hearted joke being a dick? They compare it to any other situation. Say, a friend gets a new car and won't stop talking about it, and you jokingly tell them to go start racing. That's not cruelty, that's just a nudge, a social cue. We hear you, let's talk about something else now. And that's really where this thread splits in half. Is he so smart maybe send him to school already and gentle funny nudge, or is it a thinly veiled, you're boring me? A lot of the debate comes down to tone, which, of course, nobody in the comments can actually hear. Several people point out that the joke reads pretty mild on paper, but combined with how OP describes his own annoyance in the post, they suspect the delivery in person was probably a little sharper, a little more clipped than haha anyway. Down in the more divisive section of the thread, you get a lot of how is this even a debate energy from both directions actually, which is honestly kind of funny. One heavily upvoted comment just says plainly, I don't understand why that would be offensive at all. Which, fair, if you're reading the words in vacuum, but directly underneath it, someone counters that the phrase itself isn't the problem. It's very likely the tone. If it came out flat or a little sarcastic or deadpan, that same sentence stops sounding like banter and starts sounding like mockery. And a few people chime in agreement that the delivery is probably doing all the heavy lifting in here, in one direction or the other. There's also a whole side argument that breaks out about where it's fair to get tired of baby talk specifically, versus getting tired of any topic that dominates a conversation. Some commenters argue new jobs, weddings, new houses, new pets, literally any big life event can also monopolize a dinner table, and people get sick of hearing about those too. It's not a baby-specific problem, they say. It's a you've been talking about one thing for 2 hours straight problem. Others push back hard on that, saying that kids are different, that a friend group should be able to sit through one dinner's worth of new dad enthusiasm without someone needing to be choked back into line. And then there's a smaller, sharper argument buried in the replies about that exact wording in OP's post. Everybody seemed bored, and I was trying to make the atmosphere more fun. A few commenters zero in on that phrasing specifically, arguing that no matter how OP dresses it up, what he's really saying is, my friend was boring everyone, and that this framing alone tells you how OP actually felt sitting at the table, long before the joke ever came out of his mouth. Honestly, I think this is one of these posts where almost everyone in the comments is right about a different piece of it, which is exactly why it's so split. The dad wasn't wrong to be excited. 5 months in, sleep deprived, running purely on new parent pride. Of course the baby is the main character of his internal monologue right now. It's not a character flaw, that's just where he's at in life. But OP wasn't exactly wrong to feel a little glazed over either. A whole dinner of he's so smart after every single anecdote is a lot, even if you love the guy. The problem isn't that OP got bored, the problem is what he did with it. Here's the thing, there were about 6 softer moves available before buy him some books and send him to school. A simple man, he sounds like he's growing so fast, and then pivoting to something else. Asking someone else at the table a question, even a much gentler joke that didn't carry that little edge of, okay, we get it. Instead, OP went with a line that, even if it landed as funny in the room, has a pretty clear subtext if you slow it down. Your kid isn't actually that special, and you're annoying me by acting like he is. That's going to sting no matter how good your delivery is, especially aimed at a guy who is by definition at his most emotionally raw and proud new parent phase. So I land somewhere close to that top comment. No real assholes, but also oof. This wasn't a moral failure on OP's part. It was exactly a bad read of the room at the wrong time, wrong topic, to the exactly wrong friend. And I think that's honestly why the friendship has gone quiet since. Not because the dad thinks OP is secretly evil, but because it planted this tiny awkward seed of, does my friend actually find my kid annoying? And that's a hard thing to unhear once it's in your head. If I were giving OP advice, it wouldn't be grovel and apologize for having a personality. It would be something much simpler. Reach out, acknowledge that the joke came out sharper than he meant to, and let the friend know he is happy for him, genuinely. Even if 5 straight he's so smart, in one dinner is a lot for anybody. That's it. No essay, no big dramatic reconciliation, just enough to close the gap before we haven't really hung out since quietly turns into we don't really hang out anymore. So, what do you think? Was this a harmless joke that a new dad took way too personally? Or was OP one bad night's sleep away from getting quietly dropped from the group chat? Let me know your verdict down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.